You're live. Good evening. Good morning. I see there's one of you saying there's morning. Okay, so we got 2 more minutes until the official start of the stream. So let's see if I can send out the invite links in the Discord service before we start, in case there are some people who haven't dropped in. Also, if there's anyone of you awake in the stream, if you could tell me if you can hear me any well. I've tried out my microphone a bit, but as you can see, I'm sitting a bit far away from it. So I wanna see if you guys can hear me properly, or if you want me to move closer to the microphone. Yes, there we go. Awesome. 20 seconds. Yeah, I put hello Tyler. Yeah, I put a slow mode on the chat in case. You never know. I mean, usually these live streams tend to be pretty civilized, but yeah, you never know what sort of funny people can drop in, especially since I decided to invite the the Baltic Empire audience as well, and there's I haven't live streamed for the Baltic Empire audience yet, and there's a lot of lovely people in the Baltic Empire audience, but there's also some shady people who show up on the videos every now and then. Okay, let's see. Just gonna send out the invite links here. Having to practice my multitasking abilities. Currently live stream. Okay, let's do live stream is up. Hop in if you have any questions or just want to hang out. There we go. Well, it's 17:01 p.m. where I live, which is the official start of the stream. So I guess it is started. I see we have some questions already. I have a question for when we start. Yeah, you can drop your questions right now, and I'll try to work my way through the chat throughout the evening. And I will go through all the questions. So you also don't have to repeat your questions. I also don't have anything scheduled for tonight, so I'll probably be streaming for. Well, we'll see. We'll see. We'll see the mood, see how tired I get. But I'll try to work my way through all of the questions. But yeah, basically just a sort of short introduction. Also, my webcam is sort of set a bit away from my computer, which is also why I sort of look away. It's my webcam is not placed on top of my monitor, so I have to look at the screen in order to see my questions, which is why I'm kind of tilted, what's it called, Mr. Penguin or whatever. Anyway, so a short introduction. I used to do live streams last year during the autumn. I stopped doing live streams because I could only live stream during the evenings, and where I live, it becomes incredibly dark during the evenings in the winter. I didn't have enough good lighting to make it really so you could actually see me during the evenings. Now we have summer. Now it's the opposite. So now it's pretty much never night. It's a few hours of night, and it's usually quite bright. So it's pretty much perfect streaming weather. And also, as you might have noticed, is I've sort of switched to producing more long form content on the tube, which due to the increased production costs, I naturally cannot release videos as often as I used to. So I thought it would be fun to try out live streams more often to sort of supplement the regular uploads. Okay, that's it for the boarding introduction. So let's see what kind of questions we have or statements. Dog said, "Damn, what an outfit!" Yeah, thank you very much. Invictus said, "The beard suits you, looking mighty fine there, good sir." Thank you very much. I'm simply too lazy to shave. It's really, well, I did actually kind of trim it. I used to have a longer beard, but eventually it starts to become a mess, especially the mustache when it becomes difficult to eat. Tyler said, by the way, a couple pirate academics I know watch the channel and really love it. I'm glad to hear. There have been some people recently who have emailed me, and we had a few chats, and I always appreciate like the emails and talking to people in emails. There was someone, I guess it depends on how you define academic, but someone asked me a bit about Anne Bonny and Mary Read. There are also some people who publish blogs who message me. That's always fun to see. Okay, so first actual question. Pop1 asked, what book do you recommend for 17th century ships? Yeah, that's a good question. Well, depends on how you define a good question. I have it depends. I mean, it's a really big question because ships are a big question. It depends really if you want to learn about what type of ship. If you want to learn about cargo ships or pirate ships or navy ships, and then it also differs from different nations. So I have one book I've used recently on British warships, and I also have a book which I use on French warships. I don't think I have at the top of my mind. I mean, I have so many sources, and so I'm never like certain. I often have like hard times because I often like read a book and then I forget about it. And usually like for all of these like ship videos, I tend to use like a lot of like different sources, and I also use like supplemental papers. So for example, there's like there is a really good study on the La Belle shipwreck, which I would recommend, and it kind of goes also into the construction of the Barquelon, which was a very common French vessel. But a sort of good overview of 17th century ships is, Benison Little. I always recommend him. See Rover's Practice. That one goes into ships. I'm also trying to remember the one I have on the British warships in the period, but I think I actually have it in the sources. I'm kind of like going a bit on a rambling because I don't really have a concrete answer, but I'm probably gonna like release some more ship videos in like the future. So I would probably recommend you're gonna check out the sources there, and also these sources on my current ship videos, like the one on the sloop. We can actually jump in. Oh, actually, we can jump into the description of the fancy video and see. Oh yeah. Let's see if I can paste it in the chat. This book was pretty good. British warships in the Age of Sail, 1603 to 1714. Like that book is pretty good, but it's focused on the British Navy. And I have this book up. I also have this one on French ships, warships in. I'll paste it also. So these two books, if you want to go into the navies, but it doesn't cover like merchant ships and stuff. Anyway, I've rambled too much on this question, so I'll try to move on. So Blockage asks, video about the red naval flag. There's going to be sort of a general answer, but I sadly will not be able to answer questions regarding like future videos because. I mean, because I don't know if I'm gonna make a video or not really. I tend to have like a schedule of videos, but I often like change the schedule depending on if I get like new ideas or depending on the available research material I have at the moment. So questions about future videos will sadly be difficult for me to answer. I do tend to leave like hints at future videos in my current uploads, and I also think I've hinted at the videos in coming in now in June and July. So yeah, July is gonna be the Richard Taylor video, because I wanted to. The Richard Taylor video is really meant to be like a sort of companion video to the Levasseur video, since those guys are pretty much apple and pie. Well, not really. It's more like, I don't know, melons and pie. I don't know. I never tried lemon pie. It sounds absolutely disgusting. The red flag has been mentioned, but no video to be had so far. I mean, there's not really too much to say about it either. I think I've covered it enough in like, it was hoisted. It was used pretty much by everyone as like a flag of no quarter. That you show that you're not going to show any mercy or take mercy for that matter. So Jörten asks, was there any accounts of pirates purposely capturing cargo ships like Dutch flutes to be specifically used as supply ships that they would ferry supplies to and from? Okay, first of all, I absolutely love that you actually say flutes and not float. That is very admirable. So my hat's off to you. I'm currently not wearing my hat. Oh yeah, here's the hat. There's the hat. So yeah, I'll take off my hat for you, sir. Okay, let's see if I can hang up my hat. Yeah, a lot of people use float, which is the Dutch spelling, but they don't know how to pronounce it, and I didn't know how to pronounce it for the longest time either. But yeah, as to your question, if they would use flutes as tenders, which is the name they used for supply ships, I think mostly they would actually use pretty small vessels as supply ships. So sloops were actually very common, tenders, because you would only have supplies on them. You wouldn't have anything else. But it seems like it wasn't too common to capture flutes for that purpose. I have no recollection of it, at least. But flutes, and also flutes aren't really suitable combat vessels. They are very, very defensive, but they are not especially offensive, which is what pirates operations are about. I think there are some mentions of pirates using flutes, at least pinks. And the pink is a sort of English adaptation of the flute. And a few pinks were used by pirates, quite a few actually. And you could also use flutes. I think actually it was Jean David Now, Olonay. I think it might have been him or some other one of the flybusters who used captured a flute and then used it. He disguised it as a fishing boat and then to lure enemies in. But my memory is not the freshest on that point. But I know that like flutes could be used by pirates for that sort of purpose. Okay, so Tyler asked, my question, what do you think of that recent document for a 1719 Mary Read being arrested for theft and being sent to the colonies as an indentured servant? I'm fascinated. I saw that you guys talked about it in the Discord server, but I haven't really had the time to like really read through it. But it sounds interesting, definitely. I'm kind of thinking also, yeah, it sounds interesting. Definitely a lot of like work, more research can be put into it and see what comes up. There is, of course, the sometimes there is this like tendency of like when you see these sort of like connections in these documents and people get very excited about it. So I would always advise like you can always discuss like possibilities, like could this be the pirate Mary Read, but there should always be like, and I think it's fun to discuss these possibilities, and also you should always mention all of the possibilities, because you never know, and that is really what history is about. You take all the possibilities and discuss them and say, because we can never know for certain like 100% what happened. But what I'm trying to say is that this should be approached with caution, because it's a relatively common name. It could be anyone, but it's definitely interesting. But I don't know much about it either. Jurton also asked, are you familiar with the game Blood and Plunder? I know about it. I haven't played it. I don't really. I think the artwork is excellent, and the models look great. But I'm not personally invested in sort of tabletop gaming. Sadly I've never done it. So but it looks awesome. It's also, you know, people are taking, here's the thing I love. I love when people take history as an inspiration and then use it to create something. They create a game like Blood and Plunder, or they take Blood and Plunder and history and then use it for entertainment and for a sort of community purpose, and like making fun for each other, which is what tabletop gaming and DMing is about. So I do really appreciate it, and I've seen also the artwork. I've used a bit of their artwork in my videos, actually. I've used their artwork for Levasseur, actually, in the recent Levasseur video. So yeah, I like Blood and Plunder, but and I appreciate what people do with it, but I'm not a tabletop gamer myself, sadly. Frogman asked, I have a question. When pirates tied silk slings, if they did, were they attached to the handle or inside of the trigger guard? That's a good question. I actually have, if you see, I actually have like a sort of attempted to make, this is not silk, this is some other material. But I have one of my pistols here. Let's see if we can bring it up. So here I have, I also have my other pistol, but I've tied the cloth to the handle. And I don't think there is any definite evidence of whether they tied it to the trigger guard or the handle. There could definitely be an advantage in tying it to the handle, because the handle is firmer, and I think that's going to provide, that definitely provides a stronger grip for the tying. But I haven't had any issues tying it to the handle. The sort of knob here at the end on the butt of it, that kind of assists with preserving the sling to it. So I haven't had any issues, but I haven't really like taken it out for a sort of field trip or whatever. I might do it in summer if I go to Gotland. I might do it. So I think they could have done both, but also the silk sling theory is, it should be remembered, as you said, if they did, it is a theory ultimately. There isn't like too much evidence to prove it. I think it is possible that they did it, but there are also historians like Benson Lill who he isn't a fan of it, and he has done some tests himself and he hasn't found the tests to be satisfactory. So it's definitely possible that you could argue about the silk sling theory either way. And regarding your question in particular, whether they tied it to the trigger guard or the handle, possibly both. I would say trigger guard is probably safer. Yeah, it's a very interesting question. I'm probably going to cover it in like when I cover pistols more. But it's definitely like up for debate. And it's also like there's a question, because there were all type of sling used in the period, which I've seen pictures of, but they used like they had sort of like a metal hoop attached to the pistol itself for keeping them. And it also seems like some pistols were actually pierced in the handle and had like a hoop inserted through there, and then the hoop was slotted onto the sling. But the sling seemed to have been either some sort of thin cloth, or they seem to have been leather. Yeah, it seems like a very shallow topic, but you could go on really forever talking about it. David Labaril, I hope I pronounced your name correctly. David Labaril, I think you're French at least, said evening. Yeah, good evening to you too. I hope you're having a good time. HP Lovecraft, oh my god, it's him. Unrelated to pirates, but are there any video games you like to play? Yeah, at the moment I have been playing the Fallout games. So I have been playing, I played Fallout 3, and I did one playthrough of Fallout New Vegas, and I'm doing another playthrough of Fallout New Vegas, because you can, I mean, that game is like so replayable, so you can you can play it a lot. And I have like a lot of playthroughs planned for it. I also plan on playing, I tried out Fallout 1 a bit, so I'm going to play it next as well. Also, I did watch I started playing Fallout before this series, by the way. I watched the series. I I didn't really like it. I know it's very popular, but it was kind of mid tier. So yeah, those are the games I'm playing at the moment. Jurton asked, when did the galleon and its larger variant, the war galleon, finally fall out of use? It's kind of a complicated question because it depends on how you sort of define the galleon. Because as with all ships during the period, it kind of the name stuck, but the construction evolved. So you can, if you look at like warships from the 17th century, like the mid to late 17th century. Well, let's try to make this like a short answer. So the galleon, for general sort of war purposes, historians seem to agree that it sort of faded out of usage in the mid 17th century. But and also that's at least when people stopped using galleon to refer to warships and they started using other words instead. And galleon was instead, after 1650, used almost exclusively to refer to Spanish treasure ships. So the convoy ships that traveled between the Americas. Well, first it was the Manila ship, the Manila galleon, which traveled from Asia from the Philippines across the Pacific Ocean to Mexico, and then the other galleons traveled between Mexico and Europe. And these galleons, early on in the early 18th century and in the 17th century, they would resemble the galleons we are familiar with, with the very high sterns and the raised forecastles. But gradually they would lower the construction, so the ships would become more streamlined and have shorter, lower constructions. So they would resemble more regular large ships. There's also talk in some journals from the period of galleon style ships. So certain ships which were built galleon style, which means they were smaller than the treasure galleons, but they had high sterns and they also had balconies around the sterns. And one of those vessels appeared as late as 1709. But it also depends if how you want to define the ships. Like, do you base your definition of ships on the name of the ship, what people call it? Because that in itself is also complicated, because different people might call the same ship different names during the period. Because during the 17th century, the ships were often defined. They were defined both by the hull construction and by the rigging, and of course it differs between different nations also. But you see, even in different documents describing the same ships, one person might use different classifications, and different witnesses might use different classifications. Where I'm going with this actually has a red line where I'm going with it. In that, if you look at there is this picture of a French ship of the line from the early 18th century. I've used it in a few of my videos. And it has a very high stern, so it kind of resembles a galleon. But and there are definitely ships which resemble what we might want to call a galleon, but no one would call it a galleon, because galleon had started meaning Spanish treasure ships. I hope that was an answer to your question. Sadly, a lot of my answers are only more questions, because that's how I am. I am a very messy person, and I find history to be complicated. And I find that's what's fun about history, is that it is complicated. Riot asks, were there any famous Albanian pirates? Not that I know of. I'm not really invested in Albanian history, and I'm not very invested in Mediterranean history or piracy. So sadly, I cannot answer your question. Tyler asked, why do you think the British EIC is strongly associated with piracy and not the Dutch VOC, which was around longer, made more money, and was more influential in the era? I'm not really sure what you mean by associated with piracy, if you mean if they engaged with piracy themselves, or if you mean if they traded with pirates, or if you mean that they fought pirates. I think it is largely because the during the sort of period which I cover, the golden age of piracy, so the 17th century and early 18th century, the EIC, they fought pirates much more than the VOC, and the VOC actually did. If you watch the Levasseur video, I'm not sure, I don't remember exactly, but I think I talked about it. If I didn't talk about it in the Levasseur video, I will talk about it in the Taylor video. But the VOC were actually more receptive towards English pirates and the Marooners and those, because those pirates primarily fought against the EIC, the English East India Company. So the Dutch, of course, they were like, "Oh, you're fighting against our competitors," So they're quite happy about it, and they were quite willing to trade with the pirates and receive them at their bases. Of course, the Marooners and the pirates of this period, they also attacked the VOC. As I talked about in the Levasseur video, they attacked De La Goa in East Africa and kidnapped the hydrographer. What's his name again? Jacob de Bucoy. But the EIC were more like openly, vehemently opposed to pirates. So I think that might be why they're more associated with it. Popcorn asked, which historical pirate won against Marines in a ship-to-ship cannon fight? And would you say if Blackbeard didn't get killed, he would be king of the pirates? Marines in a ship-to-ship cannon fight. I think someone posted a while back a newspaper clipping of some pirates mistakenly attacking a ship full of soldiers of redcoats, and they just ran away. There are cases where pirates defeat pirate hunters, so privateers, basically. At the top of my mind, I can't remember any incidents where they defeated Marines. Blackbeard, if Blackbeard didn't get killed, he probably would not have been the king of the pirates, because he was kind of down on his luck when he got killed in was it 1719 or 1718? One of those. He was reduced to having a small sloop, and he was sort of engaging in small time piracy in the Carolinas, sort of like just stealing from like small French sloops. His whole world kind of came crashing down. His ambitions kind of came crashing down when he lost the Queen Anne's Revenge, which seems to have been an accident. If he still had the Queen Anne's Revenge, he might have been able to accomplish more. He definitely seems to have had very very ambitious plans. He seems to have wanted to become a privateer when the war resumed. Riot asks, were there any famous Muslim pirates? And if there is, would you make a video about religion and pirates? I'm very interested about religion and pirates. Yeah, there were quite a few Muslim pirates. They weren't like active in the sort of regions which I focus on in the colonial world. They operated out of the Algerian coast, so the modern countries of Morocco, Tunisia, Algiers, the Barbary coast, as it was called. But they weren't pirates per se. They were privateers, so they were state aligned. They served under the Algerian princes, but they were like different states, and they also had a city state or republic called Saleh, which was kind of its own independent thing for a while. But I know a bit about the Barbary corsairs, but I'm far from like an expert in it. I've read like 1 or 2 books about it, but far from an expert. David Labaril said, I'm an Italian, not a frog eater. My apologies. Cal said, forgive him, brother, he's Scandinavian. Oh yeah, Cal, nice to see that you made it here. I was wondering if you were going to show up. If you post any edgy questions, I may or may not be able to answer them. Well, we got a few of the Baltic Empire crowd over here, but I think you've been in the streams before. Magellan said, ahoy mates. Hello, Magellan. So Cal said, you look like George Harrison when he dressed up as a pirate on Monty Python. I watched Monty Python when I was a kid. I do not know who George Harrison is, but he probably stole my looks. I'm going to call plagiarism on that one. Tyler asked, is there any history book on piracy you bought and never finished because it was just so useless and or bad? Wow, that's such a negative attitude to have. Not at the top of my mind, no. I think I've every like a book I've acquired. The thing is, like, I have a lot of books which I'm able to find like on the Internet Archive. So it's very uncommon that I find books that are like poor, and usually I manage to like find some use out of all the books I read. And I think all of the history books I've used and read have some sort of merit to them. Um, but you have to remember also that I use a lot of sources for the videos. I don't just use one source. So if there's something in one book which might be incorrect, then I can supplement that information from another book. So there's usually like a lot of use to be found in everything, I think. And I'm also not a negative person. No, just kidding. Frogman asked, I was wondering, do you buy black powder to shoot your guns, or do you make it yourself? That sounds like something I could get arrested for. Because I personally make it myself. Oh my god, you should not admit it. I don't know. I think you posted this a while back. Maybe the Marines have come knocking at your door. I haven't fired any of my pistols yet because one of them I don't think is able to. I think the wood on it kind of interferes with the mechanism, so I don't think it's safe to shoot. And the other one arrived like a few days back, and I think you could shoot it, but it also has like the half cock is when the lock is placed, the half cock on it doesn't fully work. Jerton asks on the galleon question, I'm referring to the traditional sense, as you said, with high stern and forecastle. Yeah, those kind of galleons, they yeah, I think I should have answered it. I think I've answered it kind of completely before. Raymond asked or said, thank you. I recently purchased a naval French cutlass 1800. Could you please clarify if it was true that they were not sharpened until they were issued or going to battle? Rumors or not? Yeah, this is some I've actually never heard about it. Heard about this. It sounds interesting, but sadly I cannot answer it. Matt McLean said John James versus Essex Price. Joseph Bannister defeated 2 warships. Yeah, there's a lot of like debate on like Bannister on like whether he actually defeated the Navy or if it was like a stalemate. Because it's also remember that like he and it's also like it was even if it was a victory, it was a Pyrrhic victory because Bannister he basically beached his vessel, took off the cannons, and then he built batteries on the shore to bombard them. And then the Navy, they just like couldn't defeat him, so they just ran away. And then I think Bannister tried to flee, but he got arrested by the same Navy a few days later, and then he was hanged on the spot. They didn't even take him to trial; they just hanged him on the ship. So I wouldn't like call it a victory, even if he held out. There were definitely more impressive cases where pirates were able to hold their own. I think the most impressive case of pirates scoring against pirate hunters, not Navy per se, is definitely that I think it's the Thompson guy who I'm not going to go into it. I think I'm going to talk about it in like a coming video, and it's kind of a complicated incident. Richmond Nathan said, I heard that piracy was equivalent to treason in the golden age of piracy. I don't know if it's true or not. Yeah, I think they actually during the whole period they changed the I think it was with the Navigation Act, so around the same time period in the 1690s that they changed the legality surrounding piracy, and that was when they made it equivalent to treason, because beforehand you could actually when piracy wasn't equivalent to treason, it was way easier to get away with piracy because you just say that like, yeah, I have a commission. So because there was like this huge issue of like the post English kings, James I, I think, when he was deposed by Parliament in 1689, I think, he started handing out commissions kind of nilly-willy, and a lot of people took up the commissions and they started robbing from the English. And when they were arrested, they just said, oh, we're privateers, we're doing this legally. And they were like, yeah, we kind of need to change the laws. Vargold asked, were there any noteworthy pirate inventions? If there were, did any affect the course of history in a major way? That's a very interesting question, actually. And it depends on how you define inventions. I guess you could maybe argue that they invented the Jolly Roger. It's not really, I mean, if you mean inventions like a steam engine or something like that, they definitely didn't invent anything impressive like that. And it's also, since they didn't really provide any sort of like documentations of what they did, it's also hard to like know what, I guess you could also say like, and the pirates also engaged a lot in like reseeing, so they cut the ships down to streamline them and make them faster. But it's also not known if like it's something pirates exclusively started doing or invented. But I think like innovations by pirates, if you include linguistic inventions, William Dampier made a lot of contributions to the English language. Some people, you could also argue that pirates invented a barbecue as we know it today, but they kind of appropriated it from the Native Americans and then changed it around a bit, and then started producing sea rations with it. So it depends on how you define invention. If you define invention as like something entirely unique, or something which is like you take something and then change it radically. So we got a super chat from Thugrob 1991. Also, is that like Filthy Frank you're having as your profile picture? I appreciate your content, bro. Much love to keep the past alive for more people to learn. No problem. Thank you so much. Thank you for the super chat, and glad you enjoy the content. So let's give you, can I give you a heart? Yeah, I can send you a heart. There we go. That's so wholesome. Right. Magda asked, what's your opinion on the pirate Edward Lowe? A lot of people talk about him. He's actually surprisingly well documented. He definitely seems to have been quite complicated. Like there's definitely seems to have been a lot of, for those people who don't know, Edward Lowe is regarded as the most brutal of the pirates from the period, and he definitely engaged in like a lot of abuse of prisoners and torture for seemingly no good reason except to just for the hell of it. He seems to have had some sort of trauma going on, if you read some documentation. What I find most fascinating about him is what happened to him, because there's a lot of like there's some people say that he died, but there is this like, I think we talked about it on old streams as well. There's this one historian who found like one mention from the War of Jenkins' Ear in 1739 that he had taken up and joined a Spanish garrison in I think Cartagena, like the somewhere on the Spanish Main. Monkstery said, "Oh yeah, good to see you, Monkstery. I was hoping you would show up. Good to see a new stream. I've missed these. Yeah, it's the lighting is better for me now during summer, so it definitely allows for more. It makes streaming more easier to do, so you guys can actually see me." And you also asked, Monkstery also asked, do you have a favorite historical Jolly Roger or Buccaneer flag? Yeah, the thing is like, it's a good question. The thing is like, I read about so many of these flags so much that like and there's so many of them that I tend to forget about them. But since it's fresh on my memory, I do like the I think Levasseur definitely has like the best collection of flags. And I like the one he had, where I also used it in the thumbnail because I do like it, where it's like a guy holding a sword, I think, and like a head in the other one. And also Magellan was the one who drew that flag. He did a really good job on it. I'm trying to think. Also, Cochlin at some point used a red flag with a hand holding a sword. And of course, there were like the red flag with a hand holding a sword. It was also used by the Dutch. But I think it's cool that to see some confirmation that pirates also used it, because it's a simple design, but it's really cool. And I think that also leads some credence to Thomas II. He's always like depicted as using a black flag with a hand holding a sword, which he probably did not use. But I think like pirates using the red flag with a hand holding a sword definitely leads some credence to Thomas II and other red seamen, possibly possibly having used such a flag. So yeah, I like the one, the red flag with a hand holding a sword, and I like Levasseur's flags. Musa B said, "Greetings, captains. Hello to you too. Hope you're having a nice evening or morning, wherever you are in the world." Okay, so Cal said, "Okay, this is a serious question. I take all your questions seriously. Are the statues in the Baltic Empire thumbnail videos supposed to be representing pointing soy jacks? Lol, I swear that's what they seem like." No, I just think they are kind of cute. And, you know, they also, all of those statues and artifacts are like findings from those regions which the videos cover. So it's kind of like supposed to it's kind of supposed to be give a sort of insight and sort of like put a face basically to these like places. And also, like, I've noticed that, like, having these thumbnails with red arrows and like circles, they perform really well. They draw a lot of attention. So that's basically it. But maybe there is some like subconscious, like people draw the connection of like someone pointing, but it's not intentional. But you know, there's something called the death of the author, which, you know, means that like eventually, like, the stuff I create, you know, it's gonna become its own independent thing, separate away from me. So, you know, it's what you as the viewer make of it. Monster said, "I don't know who the Beatles are, but I'm sure they stole from me, mega based." Yeah, I haven't listened a lot to the Beatles, but you know, I can't remember their names, sadly. I mean, I barely even remember my own name, you know. Commander Bell asked, "Will Captain Kidd's hidden treasure," I think that's what he said, "hidden treasure ever be found?" Yeah, they found it actually, like, pretty much when he was arrested, and they found it, like, the guy who hid his treasure, he like gave it up instantly and said, like, "Here you go." Like, you know, at the like the guy at the end of the um, Pirates of the Caribbean 2 movies, like, he just gave it up. I don't think they found the his ship though. The what's it called again? Is it the Queda Merchant? I think it's the Queda. Yeah, they never found the Queda, and William Kidd. He was also interviewed by one of the Armenians who had shares in the Queda, and he said, like, "Yeah, I don't know what it is, but if I knew, I would tell you." So, but maybe someone knows what happened to it. But if I don't remember. Also, someone asked me some question about that I didn't answer actually. About pirates. Oh yeah, Lenamorph asked opinions on the upcoming POTC reboot. I haven't heard about it actually. I'm actually not very invested in Pirates of the Caribbean. I think it's like the movies are fun enough. I watched them when I was young, but and I made like that like video series on the first one, but I'm not really invested in those movies. Frogman said, "Well, that's why I have black powder in case the Marines come." That is absolutely based. Lenamorph asked, "How well known was the legend of the Kraken with actual pirates?" I haven't, in period documents, I haven't like encountered any discussions about sea monsters. There are quite a few like engravings from the period of sea monsters, but usually like those engravings are big fishes. And there are some engravings of mermaids also. So it doesn't seem like the Kraken, as in like a giant, you know, squid, was especially sort of common. It seems to have come in mostly during the 19th century, but I'm not actually very invested in sort of sailors' legends and stuff, because I just haven't encountered anything about it from the 17th century. Actively Random asked, "Does most of your knowledge of pirates come from books or websites?" It comes mostly from books and from academic papers. And what books would you recommend if I wanted to learn more about historical pirates throughout the Golden Age? That's a very broad question. I get it asked a lot. I should probably make like some sort of video or like community post or whatever about books I recommend. But if you look at like the video descriptions on all of my videos, I have listed all of the sources I use, both academic papers and modern books, and also period documents. I also, of course, I don't only read modern books. I also read like books from the periods and journals and newspaper articles and stuff like that. Various documents. I also use archaeology a lot. Like in the recent video about Levasseur, there was this. I used this very good paper about his shipwreck in Brazil. And the guy who published the paper, I actually commented on the video, so that was a lot of fun. But archaeological papers are probably like my favorite resource, because I think archaeology is like really interesting, like just getting this sort of like material insight into the sort of lives which people lived. And also you find like the small stuff which is interesting, like they found, you know, in the wreck of Levasseur's ship, they found the like an idol of the Virgin Mary, I think. And also in like the Widow Galley shipwreck, you know, they found a lot of fun stuff. I think it was either in Blackbeard's ship or in the Widow Galley that they found a condom. On the Widow Galley, they also found like a pewter plate with like the Illuminati symbol engraved into it. That was quite cool, actually, like a Freemasonry symbol. That was quite awesome. And that's definitely given rise to all of the schizos, the conspiracy theorists. That's a lot of fun. But yeah, recommend. I think I've also like in one. I know you're in the Discord server, and I think we have in the book channel, we have like a pinned comment with a lot of like good books. And I think the best book at the moment, I think, as sort of like an introductory source to the period, is probably Pillaging the Empire, it's called. I don't remember the full title. Pillaging the Empire. It's a very good like overview of the entire period, even going into the 16th century. It's by Chris E. Lane. It seems to actually be available on the Internet Archive, but if you look in the Discord server, I think I wrote like a short review of it. Old Broken Squeezebox asked, "What country are you from?" I'm from Sweden. What country do you live in? I live in Sweden. And what is my ethnic heritage? That is a bit more complicated. My mother is from Latvia, so she was born in the Soviet Union, but her father is from sort of Ukraine. He's from Lviv in I think it's part of modern Ukraine, so he's Polish Ukrainian, and her mother was Latvian, but there's also like we have some descendants which lived in Estonia. And on my father's side, I think my father has been able to trace our lineage at least back to our Swedish lineage, at least back to the early 19th century and the Napoleonic Wars. I think he has talked to my sister about us also having like German or Dutch ancestry or whatever, but I mean, sure, whatever. So yeah, that's my ethnic heritage is very, very complicated. And also it gets more complicated. Like my mother is, she counts as a Russian minority from Latvia because we have no, like, as far as I know, we have no like ethnic Russians in our bloodline. Well, we have her sister. Her sister married a man from, and my aunt, my mother's sister, she lives in St. Petersburg, and my cousins are half Latvian, half Russian, and they live in St. Petersburg. But I don't think, as far as I know, I don't have any Russian lineage. But anyway, my mother was partially raised by an adoptive Russian Cossack grandfather. So she was raised in like a very Russian culture. So yeah, my sort of like ethnic. So I've actually, when I grew up with a lot of like Russian culture, a lot of Latvian and Russian culture as well. Like we ate a lot of like Russian and Latvian food when I grew up, and I watched a lot of like Russian cartoons and stuff when I grew up. Which is why I'm over on the Baltic Empire, which is why I'm funded by the Kremlin, and why I only post Russian propaganda videos, which all of the Russians also hate. No, of course, there are a lot of Russians who love my videos as well and who are very nice, but there are people from all countries who are nice and nasty, you know. So yeah, my ethnic heritage, it's very complicated. I've never done one of those like DNA tests, so my ethnic heritage is probably way more complicated. Wouldn't be surprised me. Or it might be like that. It turns out I'm maybe like 70% Swedish or something. But also, I think like if you look at someone, for the most part, you can kind of like see where they come from. And I kind of like, if when I'm shaved, I kind of look sort of Latvian, Finnish. Whereas like now when I have a beard, I kind of look more like Swedish or whatever. So I think like DNA tests and stuff, it's kind of like overrated. Like it doesn't really matter too much in the end, I think. But it's definitely fun to like know, and there's a lot of fun stories from my family as well. Loxley asked, were the Jacobite pirates of the later Golden Age less rabidly anti-Catholic than the earlier Buccaneers? They supported a Catholic dynasty after all. That's a very interesting question, actually. They definitely seem to have been less anti-Catholic. Also evidenced by the fact, that they also cooperated with seemingly Catholic pirates like Levasseur. And there isn't, and also like there seems to be like a lot of Protestant pirates like Bartholomew Roberts, who engaged a lot with he seems to have spent a lot of time with the Spanish, like spent time in Spanish ports, and he seems to have gotten at least some refuge in Spanish ports. And they seem to have been happy about it because he, of course, stole from Dutch interlopers and also from the English. And there were, of course, also like some pirates like Taylor, who took up and joined the Spanish in the end. Some argue it's kind of disputed what happened to Taylor exactly. But it also seems like Taylor and a lot of his pirates, when they received pardons from the Spanish, one of the demands they had was that they would not be forcibly converted to Catholicism, so they still wanted to keep their religion. And neither is there any sort of evidence of the pirates of this period abusing Catholic priests and desecrating churches to the same degree that the Buccaneers did. And the Buccaneers, of course, were basically iconoclasts. Of course, the Buccaneers also worked together with Catholics, like they worked together with French Catholics quite a lot. There was something else I was going to say on this matter. I think there's like there are some incidents of them abusing Jesuit priests, like the Pirates of the Golden Age. There is like, I think, this story from the A General History of the Pirates, where they kidnapped Jesuit priests and they like rode on their backs or something. And also there's this point not regarding pirates per se, but privateers, and neither was there like a huge difference between pirates and privateers in a lot of cases in mentality. During the voyage of George Shelvocke, Shelvocke arrested one of his crewmates, I think the gunner, because the gunner said, the privateering voyage, they were going to steal from the Spanish. This was in the war against Spain in the early 1720s. And the gunner said, the Spanish are fellow Christians. They are Catholics, but they are fellow Christians. So we should not go and pirate from them. Instead, we should round Africa and go to the Red Sea and steal from the Muslims, because they are heathens and not fellow Christians. So it seems like there were people, and he, of course, thought, oh, this is still going to be legal because we are robbing from heathens. They are national enemies, so we are not pirates, we are privateers. And this was, of course, the same mentality shared by open pirates like, the Jacobites, the Nassau pirates, the flying gang. So as I said, there wasn't like a huge difference between the common privateer and the common pirate. Even if someone like Shelvocke knew the difference, which is why he arrested this gunner. But yeah, it definitely seems like more people had sympathies towards, more pirates had sympathies towards Catholic Spain, and they also robbed less. They also robbed more from other Englishmen or others of their nations than they robbed from the Spanish during the early 18th century. Jerton asked, hold up. What is your opinion on how Henry Every captured the Ganges-Sawai, or Gunsway as it was known in English, during his legendary raid on the Pilgrim fleet? The battle is actually not like. Also, I covered it also a bit in both the video on the both the video on Henry Every and also in the video on the Fancy or Charles II. And I think I talk about it a bit in those videos, that the battle is it's quite poorly documented. It's only like we only have the only description we have is like a few lines of text, and basically the only thing we know is that like basically they chased the Gunsway and then caught up with her, and then they had a firefight at a distance, and they managed to take off they managed to shoot down the main mast of the Gunsway, and this of course taking down the main mast that cripples the other masts as well, since all of the masts are connected via what's it called, standing rigging, I think, as opposed to running rigging, stays and such. And also that one of the cannons by accident exploded aboard the Gunsway, which eventually allowed the pirates to board the Gunsway. And of course, it's not really known if like them shooting down the mast, if that was like a deliberate attempt, or if it was pure luck. Some do argue, and there is evidence for it, that pirates and such, they would fire at the hull of the enemy ship. Others say that they only fired at the masts and the rigging. So it could have been that it was a pure accident, that it was like, oh, we took down a mast while we were aiming for the hull. Or it could have been, and I think this was the case, that they aimed for the rigging explicitly to take it down, because, you know, the cannons they have won't really do much damage towards the enemy hull, especially a ship as large as the Gunsway. And then the question is if they, at this distance, if they used, because we don't really know the distance of the firefight either, I think at least. So it's not really known if they used anti-rigging ammunition like chain shot or bar shot, or if they used round shot. That is also something which is disagreed upon. So the battle, I think the battle is very interesting, but it's mostly like interesting to speculate upon, because we know enough to allow us to speculate upon it, but not enough to know for certain what happened. Commander Bell asked, was Singapore once a pirate colony? No, Singapore was founded in, I know it appears in like the third Pirates of the Caribbean movie. Singapore was actually established in the early 19th century, I think late 18th century, by the East India Company. So it was from the beginning like a trade post, but I think it was a good anchorage even before it was established as a city. I need to shift around in my seat a bit. My ass starts to hurt and now my hat is falling down. But yeah, Singapore, it was established in like the early 19th century by the East India Company, so it wasn't a pirate colony as shown in the movies. But I think Singapore, like them including it like that, that was really cool, and it was a really cool visual as well. So I liked it. And the whole like they have like the music box in there, and they have like the giant sauna and all of that stuff. That was cool. It's definitely like a cool scene. Thugrob 1991 also asked, do you recommend any pirate video games? Sorry if off topic. Yeah, I like Sid Meier's Pirates. I haven't played it in a while, but it's a really good. That's a really good game, and probably the best pirate game in my opinion. We also got a super chat. So that's what was said. Oh man, you have an Anglo-Saxon name, I see, and I know. Okay, so let's try. So I know the AE letter. The what is it called again? I forgot what it's called, but it's the same A as in hat. So Saskiatha, I think. My Anglo-Saxon is not at its sharpest. Anyway, love the quality and use of maps for ease of understanding in the recent videos. Thank you. I'm glad that you. I received some like comments last year that people would like to see more maps in the videos for like context. So I also use more maps in the Baltic Empire videos. So yeah, but of course maps are used in a different manner on. But yeah, I use maps more in the editing. But I'm glad you appreciate it, because of course I use it. I started using them deliberately for this purpose to get some like context, and also they look good. And I think like maps are sort of like intrinsically associated with pirates, because and there's sort of like the sort of mystical, sort of feel to maps, treasure hunting and all of that. But also a bit of like inspiration is, those like in Indiana Jones, when he's always flying to a different zone, you see this like sort of red dash line going from one area to the next. That is also kind of an inspiration before it. Just to clarify, sorry for going on a rant. Just to clarify, if one wanted that book introduction to say Red Seamen, they should check sources of related video. Yeah, that's where I got my sources on the Red Seamen, and I think, but I don't think there is a book which is about the Red Seamen specifically and the pirates in Madagascar and such, and that is because a lot of the books I used in that video are like general sources, or they are about specific topics. But Pirates of the Eastern Seas by Charles Gray, it's a bit old, it's almost 100 years old, but it still holds up. It's very, very well sourced, and there are a lot of like later sources which corroborate it. So I would definitely recommend Pirates of the Eastern Seas by Charles Gray if you want to get into the Red Seamen. Also, thank you again for the super chat. That is very kind of you, and I hope I was able to pronounce Saskaitha at least to some satisfaction. Anglo-Saxon is a very, very beautiful language, but far from an expert. Monkstory said something here. On the Thomas II flag, I have an anachronistic headcanon that he used a New England flag, red field with pine tree and white square in Canton, defaced with an arm holding a sword. Okay, sounds interesting. I kind of like this idea actually of pirates, or well, anyone sort of using their not national but like localist flags. That sounds kind of cool. And if you would make like a book or movie or whatever with that, that would be interesting. If you have at least some historical precedent for it, sounds kind of cool. History of Pirates said, "I love your videos. 100K is on the way." Yeah, I can't wait for the silver play button. I don't really care too much about subscriber count. I don't think it really matters too much, because what really matters is like consecutive viewers, like having a sort of regular viewer base. A lot of subscribers are like sleeper subscribers, so they are subscribed, but they don't watch most of your videos. So I don't really think subscriber counts really matters that much. Personally, I mostly care about views on videos. And it's also like on the Baltic Empire channel. The Baltic Empire channel doesn't have a lot of subscribers, but the individual videos, at least the recent ones, have a lot of views. Popcorn asked, if pirates trained to fight and were organized, would they be more successful? Yeah, definitely. And you can kind of see this as well, like the Buccaneers in the 17th century were more well trained and had more veterancy, and they were definitely quite effective. And you can also see like a lot of like pirate companies who were known to be more disciplined were definitely more effective. Rider Flow said, salutations. You've probably already answered that, but do you have a favorite real pirate history? Captain Swan, maybe. Yeah, Captain Swan, that video was also very fun. It's a bit of an older video, but it was a lot of fun to make, and Swan is definitely an interesting figure. Dampier, of course, as you said, he's also quite fun. Other than that, I think also Taylor, who I'm gonna make. I mean, I'm also a lot of like I'm always thinking of like the most recent stuff I've worked with. But I'm thinking of like this, and of course I love Bartholomew Sharp. Bartholomew Sharp is my favorite pirate, but his story is like also he has a very long. His story is very long because he had a very long career. But also Levasseur was a lot of fun to make as well, because he just got in so much trouble, and is he kept getting shipwrecked and just survived. That is a lot of fun. Cal asked, who is your favorite Roman emperor, and why is it Gaius Caesar Augustus Germanicus Caligula? Oh yeah, Cal actually stands for Caligula. I like Marcus Aurelius because I've read his musings, and I thought they were interesting. And I like the bit where he talks about where you shouldn't be, where he kind of he says that you shouldn't get mad if someone smells like a goat, and I think he wrote that because he probably, before writing that, he probably met someone who smelled like goat, and it was like, oh, you shouldn't get mad about it. That was kind of funny. HRM asked, abandoned on an island or keel hauling. Oof, that is quite brutal. That is quite brutal. I would probably say, I mean, keel hauling, there's a high chance that you'll die or get infected or be scarred for life. So I would actually say, I mean, abandoned on an island, is it like a spit of desert, like just sand? Or is it like an island with like provisions on it that is well frequented? But I would probably, I think my chances are high of surviving with being abandoned on an island. So I'll have to pick that one. And even then, if I would like starve to death, I mean, it's like at least you can lie on the island and then kind of like contemplate about life and, you know, watch the sea or whatever. So it's not the worst thing. You can make up your relation with God, I guess. That could be decent. You could repent. Build sandcastles. That is the most important part. History Pirates asked, would you ever consider coming on another channel for an interview or just to talk about pirates? Yeah, sure. If someone would like to do that, I presume that's you. You can always like contact me on Discord or my email or whatever, and I'm always open for that stuff. I actually did an interview like I think 1 or 2 years ago, but the guy, he never published it, and he kind of disappeared off the face of the internet. So that was a shame. Old Broken Squeezebox said, I think DNA tests are overrated for the most part too. Mostly everyone's heritage is complicated, but that was cool to hear about yours a little. Yeah, I mean, it's also cool to like when people take DNA tests and they discover something like unexpected. Like I have a friend who did a DNA test where he knew that his family came from Germany, but he found out that he's 80% Swedish and 20% Polish. So according to the DNA test, he has not a drop of German blood. So obviously, you know, it's his family, they were from Eastern Germany, from sort of the Pomerania region. So they seem to be Germanized Slavs, so Polish or what are they called? The Sorbs. So it can definitely be interesting, but you know. Federico Vasconcelos asked, B.R. Berg argued in Sodomy and the Pirate tradition that in the male-dominated world of piracy, homosexuality was common. Yes, he did, and he also said in this book that it's a theory. You know, it's a theory which doesn't have too much evidence, and that it's speculation. And it's fun to speculate about, and that it's possible. But what's really good about his book is that he sort of covers homosexuality in wider European society during this period, and not necessarily the his stuff on pirates, which, you know, he can't really prove it, and he admits it in his book. But you know, you can theorize about anything, and I think theories are fun, and it's fine. Monkster said, "Gotta go." All right. Hope you show up later. Thank you for the questions. Tyler said, "Do you ever write something for a video and eventually conclude it wasn't trustworthy or good?" Yeah, there's definitely a lot of like cases where I filter stuff out the way I like, but usually I manage to, if I find something which is like inaccurate or stuff, I usually manage to filter it out. But of course, like in my notes before I like write it into a script. But of course, obviously, like something which people have to remember is that like I stress this a lot, that like I'm not a historian because I make videos. So obviously there's going to be like errors in my videos, and like some people pointed out that like in the recent video there are some like newspaper articles and stuff which said that like the rising sun engaged the Scarborough and defeated her, and I used that as a source for the videos. But apparently there are other sources which say that the Scarborough survived, and it seems to have been what happened, that she didn't have this engagement, and that it was another pirate hunter. I know stuff like this is going to show up, and Part of the reason for it is because, and as I say, I'm not a historian, because not only do I have to research the videos, I also have to, not only do I have to read books and like documents from the period and stuff, I also have to prepare it into a script. I have to proof the script several times. Then I have to narrate the script, which, narration for like a 1 hour video can take like 10 hours. That includes also the editing. I kind of do the audio editing and the recording at the same time. And then of course I have to edit the videos themselves, which can take 60 work hours. They take a lot of time. So I have to do all of this stuff, which means I cannot dedicate myself fully to researching, which means there's going to be errors. And of course, I don't think this matters because these are not academic videos. They are produced for entertainment and as inspiration for creative projects. It's not meant to be academic sources. So it's like I don't take it like. Of course, I try to be as authentic as possible, but in the process I work with and with the workload I have to do to stay afloat and to pay my bills, there's obviously gonna some stuff is gonna slip through the cracks. And this is like inevitable with like YouTube documentaries and documentaries in general. Like if you watch documentaries from like 20 years ago, there's going to be errors, of course, because it's just kind of part of the medium. It's meant to be entertainment. It's not meant to be academic sources. Let's see. Woodard states that the flying gang pilots influenced the American revolutionaries. How true is this? The former were Tories and the latter were radical Whigs. There's definitely a connection between the pirates of the early 18th century and the American Revolution, since the pirates of this period, they were affected by the Navigation Acts in Britain, and the Navigation Acts were contributed to the resentment towards the British government, which resulted in the American Revolution. So there are some but there wasn't I don't think there was a direct influence between the Nassau Pirates and the Flying Gang and the American Revolution. And Benjamin Franklin, he lived a very long while. One of his first creative works was he made a ballad about Blackbeard's death, where he condemned a pirate. So it doesn't seem like there's at least one case of an American revolutionary who kind of condemned pirates. Virus Yikes asked, "Hey, what's the next video gonna be about?" I left clues about it on the in the last video, so you're gonna have to find it. You're gonna have to fight for it. It's gonna be a bit of a treasure hunt. Tyler and Virus are arguing a bit about whether Taylor or Levasseur is the better pirate. I think definitely the one who was most successful out of those three is definitely Condent. Christopher, or he has a bunch of like first names attributed to him. But yeah, Christopher Condent, he definitely was the most successful because he retired as a merchant, he got a wife, and he didn't die or lost his money or whatever. And Taylor, it's kind of disputed what happened to Taylor, and Levasseur, he didn't really end up too well for him. But yeah, I hope to cover Condent in a future video, but I'm not sure if I'm gonna do it because it might not attract a lot of attention. Let's see. Vargold asked, question of highly speculative curiosity. Assuming a sizable pirate group with 5 vessels can organize well, what would they need to make a self-sufficient settlement? Just some world-building fun possibility. That depends on what the goal. I mean, first of all, this kind of sounds like any colonial endeavor, because you have to remember that like the early colonies established by France and England were quite often piratical endeavors. Like there's this kind of, I actually watched a lecture about it today. The early Puritan colonies. They weren't exactly. It's kind of a meme that the early Puritan colonies were established as like religious refuges, whatever. Um, because during the early 17th century, when Jamestown and all of those settlements were established, the Puritans weren't persecuted. So they were economical endeavors where they wanted to get in on the riches of the New World possessed by Spain. And what was mentioned in this lecture was that a lot of the early colonists, a lot of the early Jamestown colonists and the Puritan colonists were jewel crafters. They weren't farmers, they weren't settlers. They were jewel crafters who, what they wanted to do was acquire Spanish gold and silver and melt it down into candelabras and jewelry and stuff. Which is also why they weren't exactly good with farming, which is contributed to the Puritan colonies having a bit of a food problem in the early days. And if you remember from my video about the Red Seamen, I talked a bit about this, about jewel crafters being very important in the pirate economy. That like they acquired pirate gold and silver, and then melted it down as a sort of money laundering process. Because if you had like Spanish coins, they could be or Arabic coins, you could of course find out that they were stolen quite easily. So melting them down was like part of a money laundering process. And then of course the new items made from the precious metals could be made into coins again. So yeah, you kind of have to basically your question like of pirates with several vessels establishing a colony, that sounds like the early colonies. But it's also like what would be the purpose of the colony? Like do they want to pirate, or do they want to have some sort of industry, or do they want to become self-sufficient like farmers, or do they want to produce cash crops? Because you also have like Dampier and Lionel Wafer. They talked about potentially like they attacked a slave ship at one point, and Dampier wrote of the idea of taking the slaves and going to Darien in modern day Panama, and taking over the gold mines, and then using the slaves to dig gold. So he had the idea of establishing a gold colony on Darien. And Lionel Wafer, of course, he took this idea and he basically sold it to the Scottish government. And they, of course, started the disastrous Darien scheme, which didn't end up too well and resulted in Scotland being absorbed into England under the Act of Union and becoming the Great Britain. So yeah, to answer your question, you kind of need to answer what is like their ambitions, what do they want to do. But what you're saying is it's definitely possible. But they also established colonies. I would recommend you watch the Madagascar episode, because in the Madagascar episode it talks about these sort of like pirate groups establishing these sort of self-sufficient, or not really, communities on Jamaica. No, sorry, not Jamaica, Madagascar. Captain Green Toke asked, I'm looking to start a pirate cooking channel, both fantasy and historical. What would be a good resource for Golden Age recipes? I know there is a book about pirate food in French. I do not know what it's called. Benison Lil talked to me about it a while back. So I would email him about it and ask. Also, you should definitely read Dampier, because Dampier is the one who talks the most about food. Also, I would recommend Jean Baptiste Labatt. He has some good recipes. Those are the ones I know at the top of my head. But also, you can also look up general recipes from the period. Just sort of like cookbooks are quite good, and also recipes for like ship's biscuit, salt meat, stuff like that. I'm scrolling through the Skinhat asked, yo, Golden Gunpowder, why don't you drink rum on stream? You know it's Pirate Month, right? Well, you don't know what I have in my giant mug. Cheers. Loxley asked, what do you think of the early Elizabethan sea dogs? Did the Buccaneers see themselves as continuing the legacy of men like Raleigh and Greenville? That's a very interesting question. I like the sea dogs. I think they are very interesting. And And yeah, the Buccaneers definitely harkened back and saw themselves as a continuation of this legacy of these men like Drake. And there are of course instances of them invoking these like legends. I could of course go much more into these questions, but yeah, I think that should summarize it. But I think the Sea Dogs, they get a lot of attention, and there were of course other similar groups during this period who often operated together with the Sea Dogs, like the Dutch Watergeuzen. They're quite interesting, and they were like sort of Protestant pirate paramilitaries. They were quite interesting. Also, the French Huguenots were quite involved with piracy, and they were like some of the first. I think I discussed it in the video about the Golden Age. They were some of the first pirates in the Americas, and I think they conducted the first raid on colonial Spanish possessions when they robbed a treasure ship. It wasn't in the Americas. It was off the coast of Spain, but it carried conquistador treasure stolen from Montezuma, or plundered, whatever you want to call it. So yeah, I like the Sea Dogs, but I also like the Watergeuzen and the Huguenot Corsairs. Sloughing Sloth asked, would you ever consider doing a jokish historical analysis of the Lego Pirates theme similar to the Takor, the Armenian Gold Pirate video? I know nothing about the Lego Pirates, so, and I made the Takor video because, as I said in that video, one of my friends asked me as a joke a few years back, like, hey, you should make a video about it, because we were just messing around and we found out that he existed. So it's kind of like an inside joke to my friend, really. And I know nothing about the Lego Pirates, so probably not. And I'm not really interested in it either, I'm afraid. So Caligula asked, also, do you know that Caligula was a known sodomite? I thought you were a devout Catholic. Oh, wait, Caligula, no, that's Elagabalus. To be honest, Caligula probably was but Caligula, he killed Christians, so shouldn't you hate him? I thought you would hate him. Maybe you're being post-ironic, who knows? But yeah, question, which Caligula asked, which pirate would you say was the horniest? Probably someone said Rackham. My first thought was actually Bartholomew Sharp, because in his journal that he wrote, he brags about having sex with a Spanish woman. And you know, Rackham probably had sex with either Bonnie or Reed, and one of them was probably his girlfriend, but it's not confirmed. So who knows? Maybe he was like constantly rejected. Maybe he just got constantly cucked aboard his ship. We don't know. Actively Random asked, are you going to have another drawing challenge in the future? I don't have any plans for it at the moment. If plans for it appear, I mean, if you want to, I could have like a drawing challenge at like the Taylor video, for example, where I ask people like, hey, draw Taylor like how you think what he looks like. That could be pretty cool. So maybe I'll do something like that if you guys want something like that, because it's always fun to see like the art you produce, and you know, the videos are meant to serve as inspiration. So maybe Bobby Baby. I'm scrolling through to see if okay, Luxley asked, do you see any similarities between pirates and highwaymen of the same era? Johnson both wrote sensationalist books about them. Yeah, I read those like books where he writes about the highwaymen. I think the highwaymen were actually more romanticized than the pirates. And there are, you know, incidents or well, legends about, you know, people sort of willingly getting robbed by highwaymen because they thought it was like an exciting experience, you know, stuff like that. And highwaymen were definitely less dangerous than pirates. whereas it seems like people had a sort of morbid fascination with pirates in Johnson's time. But and I think that is like this sort of where you can make the where you can really see the difference, that some people were willing to get captured by highwaymen just to meet them, but I've never seen anyone willingly wanting to get captured by pirates. Actually, there is one incident, and that is like John King, the I think 11-year-old boy who threatened. He was captured by Samuel Bellamy, and he threatened to commit suicide if the pirates didn't invite him aboard. So the pirates were like, "Okay, sure, you can join us." So maybe some people actually wanted to willingly get captured by pirates, but there seems to have been a lot more fear toward pirates and more morbid curiosity. Maybe there are some incidents of like people wanting to or deliberately getting captured by pirates. But yeah, when talking about this media sensation, the culture seems to have been more negatively inclined towards pirates than towards highwaymen, because pirates, of course, were more of an economic threat than highwaymen were. Cal said, "No, you're thinking of Nero." Oh yeah, Caligula was the complete schizo who declared war on the ocean and Neptune. Oh yeah, he was pretty based pretty much the Terry A. Davis of the Roman era, but I don't think he was Christian. Yeah, I'm not an expert on Roman history. I know like the basics. As I said, I'm not a historian. Divina Duckworth said, "Melting the coins would also remove impurities like lead, tin, etc. in fake coinage." That's a very interesting point, actually. And also on the sort of like melting down coins as a sort of money laundry. This is actually a very old practice. And if you watch the Baltic Empire videos, I talk a lot about it in these videos, in the Viking settlements in Rus and stuff. You always find these like jewelers. And probably what they did is that, they imported Arabic silver coins and Byzantine silver coins and gold coins and stuff, and they melted it down and made it into jewelry. Of course, these coins were primarily bought in by trade, but they were also brought in by Viking raids, so piracy. So this practice of using of this sort of money laundry seems to be very old, and it's probably as old as money itself. So it's very cool, actually. So Tyler asked, here's a question: what do you think about Adam Baldridge, quasi-merchant pirate who wrote a lot, show us something for the era? Yeah, I talk about him. I pretty much cover all of his history in the Madagascar video. Like there's the like very long, I think a 10 or 20 minute segment about him, which is basically, in nowadays I prefer to like take several ideas and make a long video about it. But like a year ago, I probably would have made a separate video about Baldridge, but probably no one would have clicked about it, whereas the Madagascar video performed very well. But yeah, Baldridge, he's definitely one of the more interesting figures from the period, but largely due to what a complete scumbag he was. Like these incidents where he probably gave the directions of ships he traded with, so pirates could rob from them. Monkstrew asked, you said before you're done with media reviews, but you also said in the Sparrow video there would be a follow-up about Barbosa. Okay, so on the media reviews, I said there would be a Barbosa video in last year, whereas the comment about not doing media reviews is a few weeks old. And that's basically my standpoint at the moment, that I won't be doing any more media videos like about anything about video games and movies and stuff, because the Pirates of the Caribbean 1 videos, they did perform decently well, but they also attract like a lot of like toxic fans of these and these videos aren't meant to be like, those videos weren't meant to be reviews, as you call them. That's one thing, I never call them reviews. Or maybe I did. I'm gonna check. Now you're sort of gaslighting me. Or maybe I'm gaslighting myself. No, I never call them reviews. I call them analysis, and that is like a deliberate choice, because a review is, you're supposed to make like a comment on whether you think it's good or not, and you're supposed to give it a rating. And they're not meant. They were never meant to be reviews, because I don't think I have any right to tell you whether you should like something or not, or what my opinions are, because these videos I produce on my channel, they are about the history and learning about history. So these analysis videos of media works, they were supposed to just look at the history and then sort of say, yeah, this is true, or maybe this is not so true, but this is something close to it, and have fun history to talk about. So they were not meant to be reviews, and they were not meant to be critiques either, because I don't like critiquing stuff. I don't think I have a right to critique anything. And also like I don't like doing these sort of media analysis videos, because it's dependent on someone else's creative work. And it is, even if I don't call it a review, it is deconstructing someone else's work. And I prefer constructing stuff itself, making something creative and producing stuff instead. I think that is it's much more entertaining. These media analysis videos, they are very easy to make, and they take like a fraction of the time to make compared to my regular episodes, but it's not fun. It's kind of soul crushing, to be honest. So at the moment, basically as a summary, I don't like making them. They attract attention, which I don't appreciate, and they don't perform well enough to make it worth it. If I would get like 500,000, 1 million views, then of course I'd be all over it. But at the moment, it's not worth it. It's not what my core audience is really interested in. Because if you compare like and it's also why I had it's also why I had a sponsorship on the Assassin's Creed video, because I thought like, oh yeah, this is gonna get a lot of views, but it didn't get any views at all. And then the video about the Golden Age of Piracy, the timeline video, that got a lot of views. So that's the stuff which the core audience wanna watch. They don't want to watch media reviews. They want to watch long form, in-depth historical content, which is the stuff which is I think fun to make, and also I think it's more honorable to make as well. Caligula asked, would Mary Reed go out on a date with me? And if so, do you think I could fix her? First up, she would not go on a date with you. And secondly, and I think that's for the better. And secondly, I do not think you could fix her. And I think you're too good for her, man. You should look for someone better. And Cal also asked, but actually, were there any female pirates besides Reed and Bonnie? Yeah, in the period there were a handful, and I talk about them in the Mary Reed and Anne Bonny videos. So there was like Mary Critchett. They weren't like very significant, and I think most of them actually got pardoned. I think there was maybe one that got executed. I don't remember really. So I would recommend watching those videos to learn more about them. And of course, there were these like female pirates outside of the Golden Age. Everyone talks, about the Chinese pirate. There's also like this one, but also a lot of these like famous female pirates. If you actually look at like their histories, in a lot of cases they weren't like active pirates. They were usually like noble women who funded pirates, or who essentially employed privateers. But there is actually this one, speaking about the sea dogs, the English sea dogs. There was this one English Cornish actually aristocrat, a woman who, according to period documents, it actually seems that she both hired privateers, but she was even aboard pirate ships herself, and partook in looting other vessels. But of course, no one has actually talked about her, and frankly, I don't remember her name. And I think she was actually even accused of witchcraft. Or that might have been some other Cornish pirate woman, because there were several who was accused of witchcraft. But of course, they're not famous. No one talks about them, which is a shame, because they seem to be the interesting ones. Also about witchcraft. Accusing people of witchcraft was not something exclusively done against women. I think actually that Francis Drake was accused of witchcraft. Otto asked, when will you do a historical analysis of Playmobil pirates? I actually had a bunch of I wasn't a Lego kid when I was a kid. I played with Playmobil, and I had a bunch of it when I was a kid. And the older Playmobil toys were more historically accurate, and over time they got less accurate, and I prefer the older stuff. And there's actually a lot of people online who customize their Playmobil to make it more historically accurate as well, and also do cool stuff. But I'm not going to do a video about it because, it's not really interesting. Private Potato said, I feel like a decent amount of pirates were pretty horny. Yeah, you're probably right. The, Jamaica being called the Sodom of the New World and all that stuff. Magellan said, La Cuisine de Flibustiers by Mélanie Lebris. I think that's the French book Benison was talking about. It might have been. Sometimes the chat, like when I try to scroll, it jumps to the bottom. Jungle Raja asked, speaking of highwaymen, were there any pirates that were known to have been former highwaymen? That's a very interesting question. I think actually speaking about Sodomy and the Pirate Tradition by Barry Richard Berg, he argued that a lot of the buccaneers probably came from sort of vagrant communities in England, not highwaymen specifically, but sort of these vagrant beggar communities. But I don't actually, at the top of my mind, I cannot remember any pirate who might have been a former highwayman. I think in Johnson there is this story of a traveling playwright who became a pirate, but I think that possibly might have been made up. Someone else might know, have a more satisfying answer though, but we'll see. Just some dude asked, what were pirates like between Vikings and Golden Age? Was there much piracy going on in the Middle Ages, in the medieval times? Sorry. Yeah, there was a lot of piracy going on. So kind of the whole point of the Golden Age of piracy was so the Americas was a very lawless place, and there wasn't basically any organized government or state control in the region, which allowed piracy to run rampant. And the same sort of phenomenon existed in Europe during the Middle Ages. Essentially, the European countries were extremely decentralized, which meant that there weren't any strong centralized power or naval force or anything to crack down on pirates. The best you could do was hire merchant ships or hire other pirates to fight pirates. So there were a lot of these very strong piratical groups, and also individual noblemen and landholders hiring pirates and engaging in piracy themselves. This was a huge problem during the Middle Ages in Europe, pretty much up until the early 17th century, and then it basically just moved over to the Americas instead. Of course, there were a lot of piracy going on in the Mediterranean between Muslims and Christians. There were pirates on both sides, plundering from each other and amongst each other. There were, of course, the Baltic Sea was probably the most it was pretty much the Caribbean of the Middle Ages. It was a free for all. After the Baltic during the Viking Age seems to have been primarily dedicated to trade. Of course, there were a lot of Vikings demanded tribute, and there were raids, of course. But during the Middle Ages, it seems to have been when piracy was really rampant, between the 12th century and the 15th century, is really when piracy flourished in the Baltic. and they were like these. They were Russian pirates called, I think, like Uskilniks or something like that, who primarily came from Novgorod, and they would like attack. They would attack Finland. They attacked Sweden, and they took slaves and they sold slaves. They traveled down to Persia and the Caliphate and sold slaves to the Muslims and to Byzantium. And they took like Swedish slaves and Finnish slaves and Estonian slaves, Baltic slaves. And there was of course pirates from Pomerania who were defeated by Denmark and the Saxons, but they were kind of like Slavic Vikings essentially. And then there were of course the Victual brothers, who were a piratical group who operated around Gotland in the Middle Baltic, and they were a huge problem for decades. And they were primarily an enemy of the Hanseatic League. So yeah, and then of course there were probably more groups and probably like independent groups and ships and individual noblemen, as I said before. But the Baltic was really a hotbed of these piratical groups, and often they did attack cities. I think in 1170 something, the then capital of Sweden, Sigtuna, which is located a bit farther inland from modern day Stockholm, was actually attacked by pirates and burned. Either these were Russian pirates or Estonian pirates, or a sort of collaboration between them. And I think they plundered the gates, the brass gates of the local church, and they carried it away. So these pirates actually carried out like these very impressive operations. I hope that I answered the question. It's a very long answer to the question about medieval pirates. Tyler said, thoughts on the Cornish Killigrew family, Elizabeth? Yeah, I think Mary Killigrew, I think she was the one accused of witchcraft. I'm pretty bad with the names since I don't research this period too much, but yeah, I think they're cool, if I remember it correctly.